You have 5 minutes or you're out." The words cracked through the marble lobby like a judge's gavel. Heads turned. Conversations froze. Even the hum of the fountain in the corner seemed to pause. Behind the counter of Heritage Community Bank, the branch manager leaned forward, jabbing his finger toward the woman standing opposite him, a black woman in a charcoal suit, calm eyes fixed steady on his. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Angela Williams. Angela didn't flinch. Her hand rested lightly on her phone, the same way a chess player holds a piece just before the winning move. She could feel the weight of eyes on her, the guard by the doorway shifting on his feet, the receptionist pretending to type, the customers waiting in line who suddenly forgot their errands. The manager's voice had echoed loud enough for everyone to hear, and that was exactly what he wanted. Public humiliation disguised as procedure. 5 minutes, he repeated, his tone sharper like cutting glass. Angela's gaze didn't waver. Instead, she let the silence stretch until the space itself began to tighten. Then, in a voice measured and low, she answered, 5? More than enough. The phrase slipped into the air not as defiance but as certainty, carrying more gravity than his shouting ever could. The manager blinked, caught off guard by her poise. He had expected anger, maybe pleading, maybe tears. Instead, he was met with composure that unsettled him more than any outburst would have. Angela glanced at the clock behind the counter. Every second felt deliberate, like she was the one keeping time, not him. And in truth, she was. The guard shifted closer. His hand hovered near his belt, rehearsed authority in every movement. Across the room, a young man waiting for a meeting slowly raised his phone, camera lens catching the scene. The red recording light blinked like a warning siren. Angela noticed, and with a small shake of her head, stopped him. "Not yet," she said softly, so only he could hear. "This isn't about the clip. It's about the truth." The manager smirked, mistaking her restraint for weakness. "You think 5 minutes is a joke? I'll have security drag you out before then." But Angela only adjusted the strap of her leather briefcase, the initials AW pressed in gold against its surface. She placed her phone flat on the counter. Her reflection stared back from the polished marble, calm, steady, unbroken. This wasn't the first time she had been measured by appearances. Years earlier, at 23, a teller froze her account because her deposit looked suspicious. At 26, a loan officer laughed when she offered 30% more collateral than required. And now, in this very lobby, decades later, the same prejudice echoed again, just louder, just bolder. Angela inhaled once, slow and deliberate. To the onlookers, it looked like patience. To her, it felt like power. The manager leaned closer, lowering his voice but sharpening his words. "You don't belong here, not dressed like that, not with claims like yours. We serve real clients." The sentence landed like a slap, but Angela's posture didn't change. The seconds ticked, and instead of her being the one on trial, it was the institution itself unraveling under its own arrogance. 5 minutes. He thought he had given her a deadline. He had no idea she was about to use every second to write his ending. Angela Williams adjusted the strap of her leather case and took one quiet step deeper into the marble lobby. The air was cold, recycled through the vents, but the stairs burned hot. She had walked into countless banks before, but Heritage Community felt different. Not because of the architecture, not because of the chandelier glittering above it, was the way the people in the room shifted when they saw her. She wore a simple black suit, pressed but unbranded, paired with low heels that made almost no sound on the polished floor. No diamonds, no designer logo swinging from her wrist. Just that leather case embossed with the initials AW and a phone resting quietly in her hand. The receptionist at the front desk typed with exaggerated purpose, eyes sliding over her without acknowledgement. A junior teller nearby leaned toward his colleague and whispered, not as soft as he thought, "She doesn't look like she belongs here." Angela heard it. Everyone within a few feet did. The words hung in the air heavier than any chandelier crystal. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. Silence was often louder than protest. From the far side of the lobby, the security guard shifted again, posture squared, hand grazing the edge of his belt as if waiting for permission. His presence wasn't casual, it was staged intimidation, a reminder that if she pressed too hard, the bank had muscle to push back. Angela exhaled, steady and calm. She remembered 20 years earlier, standing in another lobby, younger, with a smile that hadn't yet hardened into patience. She remembered the same posture from another guard, the same whispered doubts, the same cold glance from a manager who never asked her name before deciding she didn't belong. The difference? Back then, she carried nothing but papers and hope. Today, she carried authority carved from decades of proof. But still, here she was again, reduced to an intruder in the very place her name signed the quarterly reports. The branch manager leaned across the counter, lowering his voice just enough to make it sting. Your kind of money doesn't walk in here without proof. Show it, or walk out. The words snapped like a lock on a cage. A couple waiting near the loan desk shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between Angela and the man behind the counter. They could feel it too, the air changing, dignity being stripped in real time. Angela glanced at the young man still holding his phone half raised. Her eyes caught his, steady and unflinching. With the smallest tilt of her head, she told him again. Not yet. He lowered it reluctantly, but his expression said everything. The junior teller whispered again, softer this time, as if the prejudice had already convinced him. This is fraud, isn't it? Angela straightened her shoulders. No words, no reaction, only stillness. She let them write their own indictment with every careless whisper. Her phone buzzed once in her hand, a silent reminder that she wasn't here alone, even if no one in this room realized it. She tapped the screen but didn't lift it to her ear. Not yet. Timing mattered. The manager smirked, convinced he'd won the silent war. That's what I thought, he muttered. But Angela didn't look away. She stood as if rooted to the marble, presence heavier than the bank's walls. It wasn't submission. It was patience, sharpened into strategy. And patience, as they were about to learn, was the sharpest weapon in the room. The branch manager tapped the counter with the edge of a pen, sharp and rhythmic, each click like a countdown. His smirk widened. This isn't a walk-in center, he said. You don't just show up with claims like yours. Verification now. Angela didn't move. Her silence wasn't submission, it was strategy. She let the demand settle over the room like dust no one wanted to breathe. The junior teller, still half hidden behind his monitor, leaned toward his colleague again. I told you, he muttered. She's playing us. Look at her, no one with that kind of money walks in dressed like that. Angela's suit was plain, her heels worn but polished. Nothing about her outfit screamed wealth, and that was the point. She had chosen it deliberately. Power didn't need sequins, it needed presence. Still, the whispers grew. The security guard stepped closer, shoes echoing against the marble. His voice was low but carried authority. Ma'am, if you don't comply with the manager's request, we may have to escort you outside. Gasps stirred at the edges of the lobby. A woman waiting for her appointment pressed her lips tight, uncomfortable but silent. A man near the loan desk muttered under his breath, This doesn't look right. His words barely reached above the hum of the air conditioning, but Angela caught them. She always caught them. The manager adjusted his tie, puffing his chest like a man in charge of more than he really was. 5 minutes is now 4, he declared loudly enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. And we're not here to entertain fraud. Angela raised her gaze slowly, locking eyes with him. She said nothing, but her stillness made the room lean in as if waiting for a verdict. Her phone buzzed again in her hand. A single message lit the screen. Standing by. Say the word. She turned the phone face down on the counter, leaving it there like a quiet threat no one else understood. The junior teller finally found courage in the manager's shadow. He stood, arms crossed, voice louder now. People like her come in every week. Fake cards, fake names, all hoping we won't check. We know the pattern. Angela's lips curved into something between a sigh and a smile. Patterns. Yes, she knew the pattern. It was always the same script. Suspicion first, proof demanded second, dignity erased last. From the far end of the lobby, a teenager sitting with his father whispered, Why are they treating her like that? His father shook his head, whispered back, Not sure, but it's wrong. Their voices didn't reach the manager, but Angela heard them like an echo of justice waiting to be spoken aloud. The guard edged closer, now just a few feet away. His hand rested on the radio clipped to his belt. Ma'am, he repeated. Last chance. Cooperate. Angela shifted her weight ever so slightly, planting her feet firmer against the marble. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't move her phone. She simply breathed in, steady and deep, and let the tension stretch until it nearly snapped. Then, calmly, she said one sentence that stilled the air. 4 minutes will tell you more about me than 40 years have told you about yourselves. The lobby froze. Even the manager blinked. He didn't understand what she meant, but the tone, the certainty made his tie feel suddenly too tight, and the countdown he thought he controlled no longer belonged to him. The lobby's air grew dense, as if the walls themselves leaned closer to listen. The manager straightened his jacket, emboldened by the sound of his own threats. He pointed toward the door with the finality of a judge's sentence. "Security," he barked. "Stand ready." The guard's boots clicked once on the marble as he took his place just a step behind Angela. His shadow stretched over her shoulder like a claim of ownership. Every signal screamed danger. His squared stance, his hand hovering near the radio, his jaw clenched like he was rehearsing how to drag her out. Angela didn't flinch. Her phone stayed flat on the counter, her hand resting lightly atop it, not gripping, not trembling. The silence that followed wasn't absence of sound, it was command. The manager expected protest, maybe even shouting. Instead, he was forced to speak into her calm, like it was a void swallowing his authority. 3 minutes, he announced, louder than before. After that, you're done here. Angela exhaled slowly, her eyes steady. The breath was audible in the quiet, a soft current cutting against the harshness of his tone. To some in the room, it sounded like patience. To others, it was defiance disguised as peace. A woman near the teller line whispered to her husband, "She hasn't even raised her voice." The man shook his head, uneasy. "That's what makes them nervous." Angela's gaze drifted across the lobby. She saw the receptionist typing furiously, pretending not to watch. She saw the young man who had lowered his phone but couldn't stop staring, hands itching to lift it again. She saw the teenager with his father, both looking at her with quiet questions they didn't yet have words for, and she let them all see her still, composed, unbending. Her mind flickered back to another memory, 25 years old, sitting in a banker's office with a folder full of numbers that should have spoken louder than her clothes ever could. The officer had leaned back in his chair, tapped a pen, and said, "You look risky." 2 decades later, she heard the same tone echoing now, recycled and polished, but never new. The manager leaned closer, his voice low, testing, "You're not verified. You're not even logged in our system. Do you understand? You're wasting my time." Angela tilted her head slightly, as if studying him the way a teacher studies a defiant student. Then she spoke, her words crisp and deliberate. "I waste nothing. I wait." The sentence landed heavier than any defense. The guard shifted, unsettled. The manager's smirk faltered, though he covered it with a scoff. Pretty words won't change policy, but it wasn't the words. It was the stillness behind them, the way she anchored herself against his storm without lifting a hand. The crowd could feel it. Authority didn't always roar. Sometimes it sat silent, daring the noise to tire itself out. The young man with the phone whispered to no one in particular. "She's not scared. She's waiting." And that was the truth. Angela wasn't here to match their volume. She was here to let their own echoes condemn them. The marble clock ticked above the counter, its hands inching forward. The manager thought he was keeping time, but every second that passed only tightened the room around him. And in that silence, Angela's silence, the balance of power began to tilt. The marble clock ticked again, each second punctuating the silence like a drumbeat. The manager shifted uncomfortably, but he masked it with another smirk. 2 minutes, he barked, his voice bouncing off the chandelier. "Then she's gone." And the guard squared his shoulders, ready. His stance said everything. Compliance wasn't expected, it was demanded. But before the silence could harden into inevitability, a sound broke through, the faint click of a phone camera. The young man in the corner, no older than 25, had raised his phone again, this time without hesitation. The red light glowed defiantly, a small rebellion in a room thick with power games. "Sir, you can't film in here," the receptionist snapped, voice shrill, panic replacing her earlier indifference. But he didn't lower it. His voice, though quiet, carried further than expected. "If she's being treated fairly, why does it matter?" Heads turned toward him. A few customers shuffled, murmurs rising like a low tide. Angela's eyes slid to meet his. Calm, unshaken. "Words, not footage," she said gently, repeating the mantra she had lived by. But the young man's lips tightened. "Sometimes words aren't enough," he whispered. The manager pounced on that hesitation. "Security!" he barked, pointing at the phone. "Remove him. No recording is allowed in this lobby." The guard hesitated. His training had taught him obedience, but the shifting air in the room gave him pause. Removing a customer wasn't as clean as removing a suspect. And right now, this woman, silent and steady, was no suspect in the eyes of everyone watching. Another voice cut through the tension, this time from the loan desk. A middle-aged man in a gray suit stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "Why can't she just show her verification?" he asked, tone caught between genuine curiosity and growing discomfort. The manager seized the lifeline. "Exactly. Because she has nothing. Because this is a fraud attempt, plain and simple." Angela remained still, her silence turning sharper by the second. She didn't rush to defend herself. She didn't beg the crowd. She let the manager's own certainty trap him, word by word. The young man with the phone raised it higher now, emboldened by the murmurs around him. "No," he said, louder this time. "I want this on record. She's calm. She's not yelling. You're the only one raising your voice." Gasps fluttered across the lobby. A woman near the entrance pulled her child a little closer, whispering, "Why are they treating her like this?" The manager slammed his hand against the counter, his composure cracking. "Because she doesn't belong here," he roared. And there it was, the naked truth, unmasked and undeniable. Not about paperwork, not about policy, about belonging. Angela finally lifted her head fully, her eyes sweeping across the room. For the first time, she spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "I asked for service. He gave me suspicion. You all heard it." The crowd stirred, unease rippling outward like shockwaves. Some shifted uncomfortably, but others nodded, recognizing the weight of what they had just witnessed. The manager tried to recover, but his voice wavered now. "1 minute," he muttered, though it landed weaker than before. Angela didn't respond. She didn't need to. The witnesses had begun to speak for her, and once the room itself finds its voice, no clock can silence it. The red light on the young man's phone glowed steady, a single dot of defiance. The manager's jaw tightened, his cheeks flushing with frustration. He slammed a folder down on the counter, the sharp crack echoing through the lobby like a gunshot. "That's it," he barked. "This service is denied. She's no client. She's a fraud, and I won't waste another second entertaining a scam." The words hung heavy. Denied, fraud, scam. They weren't just accusations, they were sentences meant to strip Angela of dignity in front of every set of eyes in the room. Angela didn't move. Her hand stayed flat on the counter, fingers resting lightly over the smooth glass of her phone. Her silence forced the manager to fill the space with his own noise. "You want to sit here like you own the place?" he sneered, voice carrying to every corner. "Then show us. Show us proof of funds, proof of identity. Or get out before we have you removed." Murmurs rippled. Some customers leaned closer, others stepped back, unsure if they were watching a routine policy check or something uglier. The teenager near the loan desk whispered to his father, "She hasn't even done anything." His father nodded grimly. "That's the problem." The security guard shifted again, unease written in the set of his shoulders. He wasn't moving yet, but the tension in his stance said he might. A woman in line finally spoke up. Her voice was steady, if cautious. "Excuse me, but she's calm. Why are you treating her like a criminal?" The manager snapped toward her, eyes sharp. "Ma'am, this is internal policy. Please stay out of it." But the damage was done. The lobby wasn't silent anymore, it was restless, questioning. Angela inhaled slowly, her voice finally returning, low but firm. "I asked for service. You answered with suspicion. I waited. You answered with insult, and now you call me a fraud." The sentence was simple, but the clarity in her tone made the manager flinch as if struck. He tried to recover, forcing a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Words won't change the truth. People like you come in every day thinking you can cheat the system. Well, not here, not under my watch." Angela's gaze didn't waver. "The only truth here," she said quietly, "is how fast you're digging your own grave." Gasps rippled through the crowd again. The young man's phone tilted higher, capturing every syllable. The manager slammed his palm on the counter one more time, voice rising with desperation. "Security! Detain her! She is not a client." But even as he gave the order, doubt flickered in his eyes. He could feel it, the room no longer moved with him. Angela didn't resist. She didn't raise her hands. She sat back slightly, as if settling deeper into her own patience, her silence daring the room to witness every mistake he made. The clock ticked again, but it wasn't his countdown anymore. It was hers. The air in the lobby had shifted. What began as whispers of doubt now swelled into open murmurs, dissonant and uneasy. Every eye fixed on the woman in black, every breath waiting for the next move. The manager's composure cracked like glass under pressure, his voice pitched higher, desperate for control. "Enough of this charade. She's wasting our time. She's trespassing. Take her out now." The order snapped through the room like a whip. The security guard didn't hesitate this time. Heavy steps carried him closer until his shadow loomed over Angela. His hand shot out, rough and uninvited, snatching the phone from the counter. The device clattered once in his grip, a symbol of stolen dignity. Gasps erupted across the lobby. A woman near the entrance clutched her child tighter. The teenager whispered, "They can't do that." But his father shook his head, grim. "They just did." "How?" Angela didn't leap to reclaim it. She didn't shout. Her eyes tracked the guard's hand, then returned to the manager, steady and unblinking. Her silence screamed louder than their aggression. The manager seized the moment, mistaking force for victory. "This is what fraud looks like," he declared to the crowd, raising his arms as if to prove a point. Fake cards, fake names, fake claims, and now, resisting security. But the words rang hollow against the weight of what everyone had just seen. A woman, calm, composed, violated by the very people claiming procedure. The guard shifted again, this time reaching toward Angela's leather case. His fingers brushed the strap, ready to rip it from her grasp. That was when the young man with the camera finally broke his restraint. His voice rang across the lobby, sharp and clear. "Stop! She hasn't even resisted." The phone in his hand tilted, catching every angle. The red recording light burned brighter than ever. The manager spun toward him, face red with fury. "Turn that off, or you'll be removed, too." But the damage was done. The room was no longer his. A ripple of voices joined low at first, then louder. "She's not fighting back. This isn't right. Why are they treating her like this?" Angela finally shifted in her seat, leaning forward just slightly. Her voice was quiet, but every syllable cut through the clamor. "You reached for what was mine without asking. That is not policy, that is theft." The crowd hushed instantly, her words slicing the air clean. The manager's laugh was brittle, defensive. "Big words won't save you." Angela tilted her head, calm as stone. "They're not meant to save me. They're meant to record you." The clock above the counter ticked again. To the manager, it sounded like thunder. The line had been crossed, and the room knew it. The guard's grip tightened around Angela's phone, knuckles white against the smooth black glass. The manager stood taller, emboldened by the sight of power snatched from her hands. He mistook silence for surrender. But Angela didn't move to reclaim it. Instead, she reached calmly into her briefcase and withdrew a second phone, sleek, matte, untouched by their arrogance. The lobby gasped. The guard blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. Angela tapped the screen once, raised it to her ear, and spoke in a voice so steady it made the manager's shouts sound childish. "Nia," she said, her tone cool as stone. "Activate protocol." On the other end, the reply came instantly, crisp and professional. "Understood, Miss Williams. Confirming live log. Internal alert initiated. Do you want legal on standby?" The words weren't shouted, they weren't dramatic, but in the silence that followed, they were heavier than a gavel's strike. The manager froze, the blood draining from his face as whispers rippled across the lobby. "Did she say protocol? Who is she talking to? Miss Williams?" Angela lowered the phone slightly, not to hide, but to ensure every syllable carried. "Yes, begin escalation. Timestamp this moment. I want every word recorded." The young man with the camera widened his eyes, the realization dawning on him. He leaned toward the woman beside him, whispering, "She planned for this." "Oh." The guard shifted uneasily, his grip on the first phone loosening. For the first time, the authority in his stance faltered. He looked to the manager for direction, but the manager's smirk had cracked into something closer to fear. Angela remained still, her second phone pressed lightly against her ear. "Send a copy of this feed to legal, compliance, and the board. Mark it urgent." "Yes, Miss Williams," came the crisp reply. Gasps again, louder this time. Customers exchanged glances, their suspicion no longer aimed at Angela, but at the institution unraveling before them. The manager tried to recover, his voice quivering under forced bravado. "Don't be fooled," he snapped to the crowd. "This is all an act. Anyone can pretend to make a call." Angela's lips curved just slightly, the faintest trace of a smile. "Pretend?" she repeated softly. "Then you won't mind when the board calls back." And the line stayed open, the faint hum of typing audible from the other end. Every second stretched like a warning, each tick of the marble clock pounding louder against the manager's chest. Angela leaned back slightly, her composure intact, her silence now sharpened into action. She no longer looked like a client under suspicion. She looked like a woman writing the script of the next 5 minutes. The manager glanced around, eyes darting between the customers, the recording phones, the guard now sweating under the weight of hesitation. For the first time, he realized he wasn't the one in control. Angela ended the call with 2 words, delivered like a verdict. "Protocol active." The lobby, once a stage for her humiliation, had just become the courtroom for his downfall. The lobby had fallen into a brittle silence. Customers clutched their phones. The red dots of recording lights scattered like watchful eyes. The manager stood rigid, his jaw set but his pupils darting, betraying the panic beneath. The guard still held Angela's first phone, but his hand trembled now, as if the device burned against his skin. Angela placed her second phone gently back on the counter, her palm flat against the cool marble. She looked at the manager, calm and unyielding, then at the guard, then at the scattered crowd. Every movement was deliberate, a performance of control. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, but it carried to the farthest corner of the room. "You just threatened to remove the majority shareholder of this bank." The words landed like a thunderclap. Gasps erupted, sharp intakes of breath slicing through the silence. The young man with the camera nearly dropped his phone. "Wait, what?" he muttered, eyes wide. A woman near the entrance whispered to her friend, "Did she just say shareholder?" The teenager's jaw dropped. "She owns it?" His father hushed him, but his own face was pale with realization. The manager's smirk collapsed entirely. His lips parted, but no words came. He looked at Angela, the way a man looks at a locked door he can't open, stunned and desperate. Angela didn't let the silence stretch long this time. She leaned forward slightly, eyes sharp as glass. "You raised your voice at me. You called me a fraud. You seized my property. And then you ordered your guard to lay hands on me." She paused, letting each offense linger in the air. "But what you didn't realize is that every action, every word, is now logged in the system you thought you controlled." The guard's hand opened suddenly, as if the phone had burned him. Angela's device clattered back onto the counter, sliding to rest beside her briefcase. A murmur swelled across the lobby. Some customers nodded in quiet approval. Others pulled out their phones to check headlines, as if expecting the story to already be breaking online. Angela lifted her chin, eyes locked on the manager. "I built the foundation that pays your salary. I sign the approvals that fund your operations, and I sit on the board that decides your future." Her words were not shouted. They were weighed, precise, and final. The manager staggered a step back. His tie seemed to choke him, his collar suddenly too tight. He stammered, This is a mistake, you can't—" But Angela cut him off with a calm wave of her hand. "The only mistake here," she said, "was yours." The crowd erupted again, this time not in gasps, but in quiet applause, a ripple of vindication spreading across the lobby. The sound was small, hesitant at first, then louder as more customers joined. Angela reached for her phone, sliding it back into her case, reclaiming what was hers without hurry, without fear. Then she stood, her presence towering taller than the chandelier above. "You wanted me out of this bank," she said, her voice cutting through the applause. "But you forgot one truth: this bank is mine." The manager's face drained of color, and with those words, the ground beneath him shifted forever. The words, "This bank is mine," lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, the dam broke. The manager stumbled back from the counter, color draining from his face. His bravado dissolved into a stammer. "Miss Williams, I wasn't aware." But the excuses fell flat against the truth already etched into the marble of that lobby. The guard lowered his hands, stepping aside, his posture shrinking from intimidation to regret. He avoided Angela's gaze, eyes fixed on the floor as if he could vanish into the tiles. The junior teller who had whispered doubts earlier now sat frozen, shame flushing his cheeks. Finally, his voice cracked out, barely audible. I heard her name this morning in the system. Williams. Executive-level clearance. His admission was both confession and surrender. The customers erupted not in chaos, but in vindication. Applause echoed off the high ceilings, hesitant claps turning into a tide of approval. Some recorded, others nodded firmly, and one woman near the entrance said aloud, "We saw it. We all saw it." Angela didn't raise her hand to silence them. She didn't need to. She simply turned toward the manager, her presence enough to quiet the room again. "You wanted an audience," she said evenly. "Now you have one." The manager's knees looked weak, his authority evaporating under the gaze of the very people he once commanded. And in that moment, the bank lobby no longer belonged to him. It belonged to her. The applause faded into a tense hush, the kind of silence that falls before a sentence is passed. Angela stood steady at the counter, her calm cutting sharper than any raised voice. She slid her second phone back into her palm and spoke, not to the manager, not to the guard, but into the open line still active on the device. "Nia," she said evenly, "log immediate suspension of branch manager ID 741. Freeze access to all internal systems. Effective now." The reply was instant, clear enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Confirmed, Miss Williams. Credentials locked. Access terminated." A sharp beep echoed from the manager's badge. He looked down in horror as the small green light blinked red, then went dark. His lifeline to authority had just been severed in front of every witness. Gasps rippled across the lobby again. The young man with the camera whispered, "She just shut him out. Live." Angela wasn't finished. "Extend the freeze to security officer credentials. Pending investigation. Include logs of unauthorized property seizure." The guard stiffened. His radio crackled once, then went silent. His badge light died just like the manager's. He opened his mouth to protest but thought better, stepping back with shoulders slumped. The junior teller looked pale, panic settling into his bones. Angela turned her gaze on him, but her words were softer. "You spoke what you believed. That's not a crime. But lying to protect Prejudice Island, which path you choose next is on you." The young teller swallowed hard and nodded, shame painting his face. Then the sound of polished shoes echoed across the marble. The glass doors at the entrance swung wide, and 3 figures entered Angela's lawyers, their briefcases sharp as weapons, expressions carved from stone. They moved with precision, flanking her without a word, their presence enough to erase any doubt. The lead attorney, a tall woman in a navy suit, opened a folder on the counter. "Miss Williams, the board has authorized full review. Immediate removal of non-compliant staff is cleared. Shall we proceed?" Angela's gaze swept the room once more, taking in the manager's ashen face, the guard's slumped shoulders, the crowd of witnesses recording every moment. Then she nodded. "Proceed." The attorney stamped the documents, the sound echoing like a gavel. "Effective immediately, Gregory Harlan, branch manager, is terminated. Security officer credentials revoked. Both are barred from all heritage facilities. Legal audit to follow." The words were cold, final, and undeniable. The manager stumbled back, his voice breaking. You can't do this." Angela cut him off with a single look. "I already did." The customers erupted once more, this time with cheers. The applause was no longer hesitant, it was fierce, righteous. Phones tilted higher, capturing the downfall of arrogance in real time. Angela turned to the lawyers, her tone calm, almost serene. "Thank you. Secure the footage, log every witness statement, and send full reports to the board. No detail is to be lost." "Yes, Miss Williams," the attorney said. Angela closed her case and stood tall, her presence radiating the kind of authority that didn't need shouting, didn't need force. She had dismantled their power with a few words and one phone call, and the bank lobby, once a stage for her humiliation, now stood as proof. Justice had been served quietly, decisively, and without appeal. The lobby hummed with the aftershock of what had just unfolded. The manager stood hollow-eyed, badge dead, career severed. The guard lingered near the door, shoulders bowed, stripped of the authority he once wore like armor. And the customers, they weren't just bystanders anymore. They were witnesses, each one holding a story in their pocket, captured in pixels, etched in memory. Angela closed her case with a quiet click. The sound was small, but in that marble chamber it rang like a verdict. She stepped forward, her heels steady against the polished floor, and faced the crowd. "You came here today to do business," she said, her voice calm even. "And instead, you watched prejudice put on a show. You watched silence mistaken for weakness. You watched arrogance mistake itself for authority." Her eyes swept the room, meeting strangers who now felt like allies. "But you also watched what silence can become when patience is armed with truth." The applause that followed wasn't loud at first. It was steady, building, until it filled every corner of the bank. Even those who hadn't clapped before joined now, carried by the undeniable gravity of the moment. Angela let it crest, then lifted her hand. The room quieted instantly. She looked once more at the manager Ashen, broken, trembling, and spoke the final words he would never forget. "I don't need to record what happened here today. I am the record, and I am the result of every insult that tried to erase me." The lobby fell into stunned silence, the weight of her words pressing into the marble, into the glass, into the very air they breathed. Then, slowly, the applause rose again, louder, prouder, unstoppable. Angela turned, her lawyers in step beside her, and walked out through the glass doors. Sunlight caught her as she crossed the threshold, not like an exit, but like a beginning. Behind her, the bank was no longer his domain. It was hers. It always had been. And justice, calm, precise, undeniable, had spoken.